Welcome back. Well, a Sydney primary school is sparking outrage this morning after giving students the choice to opt out of Anzac Day, with parents and veterans calling for the state government to now step in. Joining us to discuss today's headlines is Minister for Sport and Aged Care Annika Wells and Liberal Senator James Paterson. Good morning to you both. So, Annika, this came about after a small group of parents complained about, quote, personal beliefs. But we're talking about Anzac Day here. I mean, these diggers risked their lives, lost their lives for our freedoms. Surely they deserve a day to be honoured.
It is a really important day, and I don't think nationally anybody disputes that. In my neck of the woods in north side of Brisbane, I get to 4 or 5 ceremonies before 7, 8 a.m, and I'm looking forward to doing that again. And we've actually noticed, the RSL sub-branches and I, that it's become more and more attended over the past few years, and I think that's a good thing.
It is odd then, isn't it, James, when we're seeing this school heed to just a couple of, like it's a handful of parents, and now they've put this out collectively to the whole school. It's a public school. Should the government step in here?
Well, I think all Australians should participate in what is a very solemn commemoration of the service and sacrifice of generations of Australians to make our country safe and free. So we have freedoms like freedom of speech and also religious freedom. It's a mistake to describe Anzac Day as a glorification of war. It's anything but. No Australian is pro-war, but this is about recognising that service and sacrifice, and it's something that I think all Australians should participate in. And I think particularly young people need to understand what has been done by previous generations to give them the freedoms that they enjoy today.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't choose war, did they, these veterans? They were sent there. Is this an insult to them?
Oh, look, I don't think anyone should be insulting the service of any generation of veterans. As you say, some of these were very young people themselves. They went in their teenage years across the other side of the world to fight for principles that Australia believes in, but also to make sure that we remain a sovereign, liberal democracy today. Yeah. And we need to understand that history and commemorate that service. Yeah,
exactly. We can't be forgetting that. All right, well, let's move on. And round 2 of Donald Trump's trade war is looming. Australia tipped to incur fresh tariffs on farm produce and pharmaceutical exports. Annika, this will put more pressure on household budgets, not to mention the potential job losses. What are you bracing for?
We are ready and have been engaging with the US government since they announced this was their intention to do. We don't intend to take a backward step, particularly, I know you've already spoken to Murray about agriculture this morning. I would say on the health side, our healthcare system is what makes us the best country in the world, and we're not going to take a step back from defending that.
James, it is concerning. We don't know what Donald Trump has planned. No one really ever does until he says it. But tomorrow we could be bearing the brunt of it. What can we do, I guess, to protect ourselves? Can we protect ourselves against Trump?
Well, it would be very disappointing if the Trump administration slapped tariffs on Australia. It would be inconsistent with the obligations America entered into voluntarily in our free trade agreement, and our expectation is that America abide by that agreement, which is a cornerstone of our economic relationship. I hope that the Albanese government has done everything they can to make sure that Australia is spared from these tariffs. There has been some media reporting that allies like Australia, where the United States has a trade surplus, could be getting an exemption, and we certainly hope that's the case. I think it is harder to guarantee that, though, when the Prime Minister has not travelled to Washington, D.C. and has failed to meet with President Trump to discuss this, like so many other world leaders have done. And it's a very difficult decision to understand.
Well, that's made it more difficult, obviously, now being in caretaker mode. But, of course, that is all in the background. The campaign is well and truly underway. Annika, both leaders, Peter Dutton, Anthony Albanese, in Melbourne, it's shaping Victoria as a battleground state.
When isn't Melbourne an interesting place to be? Certainly I'm there a lot with the sport portfolio. There's a lot going on there, but I wouldn't imagine that they'll start and finish their day there. There's a lot of places to get to around Australia.
What are you concerned about in Victoria? Because it's traditionally been a Labor state. Are you worried about those outer suburbs leaning more Conservative?
Look, as a Queenslander, I've never known the comfort of a Labor state myself, so I've always gazed in fascination down south when it's called the Massachusetts of Australia or what have you.
Yes, John Howard.
I think we'd just be honest and say cost of living's a big issue. There are, people who are commuting in and out from the outer suburbs feel that keenly. We try and do things to assist. You and I have talked so much about the different measures over the past 3 years that we're doing that. But I was out in Victoria in some of those outer metro suburbs a week or two ago, and it's good for us, I think, ministers to get around, see it, feel it, experience the commute during peak hour. It helps us come back to Canberra and try and drive better policy.
You were saying before that you were door knocking in your home state.
Yes.
And what was the reaction from some of the punters? They weren't necessarily engaged in politics.
The people of Stafford Heights are an open-minded and generous people when they received me yesterday. But, yeah, for many of them, I was still breaking the news that the federal election was on when I was there to get my homework. So I would say to you, people are still, you know, in their own household matters, looking forward to Easter, looking forward to the Anzac Day long weekend.
I guess it also speaks, James, to people really focusing on the cost of living, which obviously this is an election on. How do you think it's going to shape up in Victoria, where both the leaders are this morning?
I think Victoria will be a really significant state politically in this election because Victorians are suffering under the weight of not just one but two very bad Labor governments. They've been hit particularly hard on cost of living, but they're also feeling like community safety has gone backwards on these Labor governments' watch, like there's been a failure to invest adequately in the right infrastructure that they need, that wrong choices have been made to prioritise things like an underground tunnel train in the eastern suburbs rather than dealing with the really important infrastructure projects that all Victorians want, like Melbourne Airport Rail. And so I predict there will be some big swings in Victoria, and whether that amounts to big changes of seat, we'll find out on election day.
All right, just very quickly, maybe the AFL can lift spirits. James, you're a Victorian. Should we bring back State of Origin, move the grand final, make it happen?
Well, as a Tigers fan, getting to September, let alone October, is a theoretical concern for me this year. But State of Origin will give me something to cheer, so I'd be very pro bringing back and reviving State of Origin.
Do you reckon you'll see your Lions there in October if the grand final was shifted, Annika?
Yeah, reigning premiers. I'm very excited. More sport, more AFL, more Origin. As a Queenslander, we've obviously known great happiness in State of Origin in the NRL. With the Lions where they are at the moment, it bodes well for us in the AFL as well.
Love it. I'm all for it as well, guys. Thanks so much for joining me.